Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
So we are in Parshat Lech Lecha this morning. We are beginning the story of Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu, Abraham our father, Sarah our mother. As you know, anyone who converts to Judaism becomes Bat or Ben Avraham v'Sarah, or if people don't want to use gendered language, folks are often saying now Mi Beit, from the house of, and we would say Avraham v'Sarah. So this truly is for us our mythical father and mother. This is where we locate the beginning of our particular people. We've come through the story of creation. We've come through the story of Noach. So we've come through the story of the creation of the whole world. Then what happens in that world? Noach, a very particular family, becomes the ancestor with his wife of everyone after that. Now comes with the call to Abraham, calls the beginning of the story of this particular family. Noach, even though it's a particular family, is the family of humanity, right? They're the progenitors of the entire business of humanity. With the call to Abraham comes the beginning of the stories of the founding of this particular family, this particular people. We know it doesn't stop there. We know it also becomes, of course, the founding patriarch of both Christianity and Islam. And so it doesn't stop with that, but it starts with the story of this particular people, the descendants of Avraham and Sarah, the Jewish people. All right, so we come to the story of Avraham a little bit out of nowhere. We jump kind of into the middle of it. We get the generations iterated, but then we just kind of jump into Lech Lecha. So I'll show us a few verses before, but it's also like we kind of come in mid-story. It's like we don't know anything about Avraham's character. We don't know anything about Avraham before he's kind of, has this encounter. We don't know what's going on with Avraham. So lots of questions arise in the Midrash, in the rabbinic literature, about why Avraham? Who is this guy? Like, what's going on with him? What makes him so special? Because we're told nothing. We kind of really jump in the middle, and that's upsetting a little bit to the rabbis, because they want to know a little bit more about what's going on. And so there's many midrashim about why Avraham. And so this is, and a lot of people, by the way, think this is in the Torah, the story of Abraham smashing the idols, right? So a lot of us grew up with that story, that Abraham's father Terach is, of course, an idolater, because that's the religion of Mesopotamia, is paganism. And that Abraham goes into, and that his father makes and sells psalim, idols. And that Abraham goes into his father's shop one night and smashes all of the idols. And when his father comes in the next day and says, "What have you done?" Abraham said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I guess he'd stuck a stick in one of the, the idol's hands. And he said, "This guy did it." And Terach was like, "How could that be? It's just a idol. Duh." And Abraham's like, "Duh. So if it's just an idol, why are you worshiping, right? Something that you yourself are admitting has absolutely no power." Of course, it is a horrible misrepresentation of paganism. People do not worship idols. That is, so either it's on purpose, the rabbis know that, and they're just demonizing paganism, or the rabbis are ignorant of the real meaning of paganism. But nobody worships an idol. You worship the god or goddess that the idol represents. So in any case, so this is a very famous midrash, so famous that most people believe it's in the Torah. That Abraham smashes his father's idols. Why do I say that? That is one famous example of the rabbis trying to do a little backstory on why Abraham was chosen. Because Abraham knew even as a child that it was impossible to worship fetishes of wood and whatever and call oneself like a person of real faith. That makes no sense. And so we're going to look, maybe if we have time, we're going to look at one midrash that I really love because I think it's really pertinent right now, given the elections in Israel, given what's going on in our country. There's a midrash that I find really powerful for this moment. We'll see if we have time. Okay. So we can, look here a little bit before our story begins. When Terach, Avram's father, had lived 70 years, he begot Avram. Remember, his name at this point is Avram, Nahor, and Haran. This is the line of Terach. Terach begot Avram, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot. Haran died in the lifetime of his father Terach in his native land, Ur of the Chaldeans. So this is where our story begins, is in Ur. Avram and Nahor took wives for themselves, the name of Avram's wife being Sarai, and that of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terach took his son Avram, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Avram, and they set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans for the land of Canaan. We are not told why. We have no idea why. But when they had come as far as Haran, they settled there. We are not told why. When we studied Sarai, I brought you some texts about the city of Ur and the city of Haran and the connection of the priestesses of those places. It's very interesting if you dig into it, but we're not going to do that. The days of Terach came to 205 years, and Terach died in Haran. Okay. Then we jump into our story. So, we're not told anything other than kind of the names of this family, that Avram's wife, Sarai, meaning princess, is barren. If you'll recall, when we've talked about Sarai, princess, often the high priestess was the sister of the king. So it makes complete sense if we're looking at Sarai as the roots of Sarai, if we're looking for that in Mesopotamian priestesses, it makes perfect sense. Princess, wife of, sister of the king, was often the high priestess. Lots of evidence to support. Lots of evidence. We have very little evidence for anything, but that we're dealing with probably a pedimento of characters, both in Avram and in Sarai. In Sarai's case, women of power, women of religion, women in Mesopotamian culture, the ways that they had power was often through being a priestess. Okay. But this is where we start. This is where we jump into our story with Parshat Lech Lecha, chapter 12, verse 1. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, umimoladatecha, umibeit avicha, el haaretz asher ar'eka. So we get no preamble, we get no idea what's happened before this. All we know is that Yud He Vav He says to Avram, doesn't appear. That's actually important. There's no appearance here of God. There's only God speaking to Avram. We have no indication that God has ever spoken to Avram before. We have no indication that God hasn't spoken to Avram before. We have no indication that God has appeared to Avram. Usually God appears and says, or God appears and then says, or there's a malach. Out of absolutely nowhere, Yud He speaks to this guy Avram and says, Lech Lecha. So this is one of the reasons that this is such a famous call and so open to midrashic interpretation, is because grammatically this doesn't really make sense. We have made sense of it, so for a lot of us, we just read over it. Or if you're just reading the English, you trust the English, which if you learn with me, never to do. Go forth. No. So that's ultimately what it means. But lech, the command form, you, singular, masculine, go. But what's after that dash that you see in the Hebrew, doesn't make a lot of sense to add. Lech lecha. Because lecha, of course, in Hebrew means literally to you. So it's not reflexive. No, because there is no such thing. A reflexive verb is something you do to yourself. I brush my hair. That in French is a reflexive verb because it's something I do to myself. I can't lech to myself. I can't go to myself. That isn't a verb that is reflexive. And this is not the reflexive form of the verb. It's lech, go. That is not reflexive. Lech lecha, go to you. Okay. So, that's literally what it says, but that doesn't make any sense. So obviously it must be some kind of emphasis. This using the verb twice in this weird format has to be some kind of emphasis. This is a massive going. This is not just your regular go to Ralph's. Go to the 76 station and have your tire checked on your pressure checked on your tires. This is something else. So possibly that's literally the reason for the grammatical anomaly. But that's not fun enough or deep enough for the rabbi. So we're going to look at some deeper interpretations, of course, of Lech Lecha. But we get a little bit of an understanding of why it's so intense, why it's such a weird way of saying it, and how big a leching this is going to be by what comes next. Lech Lecha, go, however we want to translate Lecha, right? Go, me'artzecha, from your land. Umi moladetcha, and, that's a hard word in Hebrew, and from the place of your birth, Umi beit avicha, and from the house of your father. You could read ancestor here. That's what they mean when they say father in this sense. Your ancestral house. El haaretz asher eka, to the land that I will show you. So, wait a minute. Yodei Vavei that we've never known to encounter Avram before. There's no vision. There's no malach. Just God's voice saying, leave your land, the place you were born, your ancestral house, to a land that I'm going to show you. Okay. So remember the ancient world. Your safety comes from kinfolk. Your safety comes from your tribe. When you get up and leave all of that, you leave everything in the universe that keeps you safe. You are now completely vulnerable, and he doesn't even know where he's going. So he's got absolutely no direction. He has no idea why. We're going to get a little bit in a second, but truly no reason why. And like no assurance you're going to be safe. Here's how this is going to work, right?
But the piece you read before, didn't he already leave with his father? Right. But he has settled. They have settled together in Haran. Okay, but that's not the place of his birth.
Well,
they've already started a journey.
Correct. They've started a journey, but what we have to assume from this is that there is a way that where he is now is connected to the land of his birth. Right? That it is not completely other. It is not completely different. It's like Texas from, Louisiana.
Or he started out with
which may be a different land.
Or he started out with his father, and this is the command to go out on his own and to separate from his.
Well, clearly it is that. Leave your father's house. It is very clear. He's now going on a journey that does not include the rest of his family, right? And that is not about whatever they were doing before. Presumably, they had some idea of where they were going, and there was some reason for stopping in Haran. But whatever those things are, this is now something else entirely.
Last week, or what have you, Noah was told to build an ark. Was the conversation very similar to this? Build an ark and your people will grow and...
Well, but Noah gets an explanation about why. Because I'm fixing to destroy the world with water. And so you're going to need a boat, a really big one, right? Let's go on so that we can see what Avram is told. What is he told after to the land that I will show you? I'm heavily influenced by Debbie Friedman in my translation. And I will make of you goy gadol, a large goy nation, and I will bless you, and I will magnify your name, and you will be a bracha. You will be a blessing. Now, put aside that you know Debbie Friedman, people, and come to this with beginner's mind, right? What the heck does that mean? I will bless those who bless you, and curse the ones who curse you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves through you. V'nivrechu v'cha, and they will bless in you. Who will? All the families of the Adamah, of the earth. So remember, Adamah, we have the resonances now of the earthling, Adam. We have the destruction of Adamah because of all of the Hamas that's happening, right? So Adamah's destroyed, and now we get all the mishpachot, all the families of the Adamah are, after this moment, going to bless themselves through you. Okay? Very clear. Avram went forth as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded him, and Lot, his nephew, went with him. Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Okay, so one of the conversations that is missing for the rabbis here is, what exactly did Avram say to Sarai?
Let's get out.
Honey? Right? So would love to know that conversation. And if we take seriously Sarai's Mesopotamian heritage, which we have to, because there is no other one in that area at this time. Avram's the beginning of this new nation, right? So she's Mesopotamian. She's got her relationship to her culture, her language, her family, probably she's with his family now, her religion, her whatever, right? And he's like, okay, so Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, doesn't that sound like a groovy name for a deity? What do you say we hang out with him for a while, and he wants us to leave everything and go to a place that he's gonna show me. And I'm gonna be huge people. That means you're gonna have, kids. And, so what do you think? Right? So I'd love one of you to write that conversation up, and let's look at that next time. But certainly one conversation that's missing. So a little bit here about, the why. The why you're leaving is so that you will be a goy gadol, a huge nation. Sarai's childless. She has no son. You can't perpetuate forget nation, your own tribe, unless you have a son, right? So she has no son. You're going to be a great nation, and all the peoples of the earth are going to bless themselves through you. I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. You're going to be a bracha. What the heck does any of that mean? All right. So he's given a reason, ostensibly, but then it stops right there. Okay. Yeah, get comfortable, Lee. Okay. So let's look a little bit at, I spent some time in the sandbox, as you can see. So here we have Genesis 1-3 that we just read. All right. So looking at Rabbi Margolius, he goes back to some of the sources and says, Rashi, remember what we go to Rashi for? What do we go to Rashi for? The Pshat. We go to Rashi to understand the literal words of the Torah. Rashi is the expert in language, and he will always try to answer the question, why this weird grammatical form, without getting all flowery. Just simply, what does it actually mean? We always go to him. He will always give you the medieval French term so that you can be clear what's happening. Okay. Right? He lives in Provence. Rashi's in Provence. So he's going to always give us the 1000s French for whatever word we're confused about. Rashi interprets the enigmatic phrase Lech Lecha to mean for your own benefit, for your own good. If Avram travels to the new land, he will benefit from the blessing of offspring and be renowned through the world for his good character. So Lech Lecha doesn't mean literally go to you. It means go for you. This is for you, Avram, that I'm telling you to do this. That's why it's this weird form, because it's telling us that God is saying to Avram, this is not just about me, God forbid. This is all for you. Reflecting a different stream of interpretation, the 19th century Eastern European commentator Malbim understands the phrase as go to yourself, an instruction for Avram to discover his own essence by casting off the negative influences he had inherited from his homeland, his native place, and his paternal home. In the same vein, a 17th century Italian Kabbalist reads this verse as addressed to every person. Search and discover the root of your soul so that you can fulfill it and restore it to its source, its essence. The more you fulfill yourself, the closer you approach your authentic self. This is the sense of know yourself, to know your very self so that you can rectify yourself, and I will help you, says God. All right, so you can see the move from the pshat, from the very literal interpretation, and then the move as we start moving into, by the time we get to the 19th century, it's about self-discovery, which you don't do till you're 75. I'm so going to be happy when that happens.
In the 11th century, the word for 2 and 4 in the langue d'oil are the same word.
What?
In the south of France, in the 11th century, the word for 2 and 4 are the same word.
So for Rashi, go you to you would make complete sense to translate it as go you for you. Lovely. So for Rashi, it's not so confusing, right? If 2 and 4 in French are the same word, then that would make sense. All right. Aviva Zornberg, in her amazing commentary on Genesis called The Beginnings of Desire, if you don't have it, you should. Here begins the journey of Lech Lecha with its strange order of abandonments. First land, then community. Leave that which produced you as one possible realization of its potential. So this strange order of abandonments, first your land, then your community, and finally your father's house. For the first time, says Aviva Zornberg, a journey is undertaken not as an act of exile and diminution. Think Adam and Chava, Cain, right, after he kills Abel, and the Tower of Babel folks, right? All of these are enforced, and they are about, in her language, exile and diminution. But as a response to a divine imperative that articulates and emphasizes displacement as its crucial experience. For what is most striking here is the indeterminacy of the journey. What is left behind, canceled out, is defined, clearly circled on the map of Avram's being. But his destination is merely the land that I will show you from your land. The landscape of your basic self-awareness to a place that you will know only when the light falls on it with a difference.
It seems that in a way the language is a remnant that indicates that this is also intended as a metaphor for an internal journey.
So I think, so Mark is saying that that the way it's written kind of suggests that it's a metaphor for the actual thing that has to happen if we are going to take a journey to the self, an internal journey. These are the things that have to happen. And I think it's fair to say, based on what Zornberg is saying, that there is a sense of, and she writes about it other places too, abandonments of where we have come from that has to happen before something else can emerge. And she talks a lot about the work. I think we talked about this off record last time. Richard is she quotes the work of Winnicott a lot. Thank you, D.B. Winnicott. She talks about his work in talking about infants, and this ties into Sarai had no valad, had no issue, had nothing that she had birthed. And what Zornberg is saying is that's right, because some things have to happen before something can be born. And there are stages of abandonments that have to happen, leave takings that have to happen before something else can be issued, literally. And so she quotes the work of Winnicott when she says, if you're constantly giving an infant stuff, here's something shiny, here's something distracting, and you hand it to them, they don't learn to crawl. How do babies learn to crawl? The baby first discerns something's missing. I mean, they don't have the language for this, obviously, but I lack something and it's over there. I want that, but there's a missingness. Yes, they're curious, but they don't have something that they want, and they see it. That longing to have something that they don't have is what drives them to reach. And as soon as they reach, then they pull. And that's how they learn to crawl. That's how they learn agency. And she says that missingness is what is critical for us to walk, for us to journey, for us to move. We have to be in touch with something's missing. And we don't like that as moderns, as Americans in 2022. It means we have been unsuccessful. We are unfulfilled. We did something wrong. And she says, no, it is absolutely clear here. It is the critical awareness that is the only thing that will begin the process that leads to the birth of something new for us. Is this lacking something, and the awareness of lacking it and the desire to go get it.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Also. It was suggested earlier that this was written as if it could also be a metaphor for an internal journey, but I wonder if in the archaeological or literary record, were there any civilizations at this time that were writing literature? I'm talking now, 10th century being written, that actually had a sense of internal dialogue. And clearly there's metaphor, but people thinking about their own internal motivations for what they're doing, that doesn't appear in like any literature that I'm aware of until more modern times.
Right. So is it self-consciously metaphor? I have absolutely no idea. It's, like you're saying, it's doubtful. However, all of the rituals that are arranged for adolescence, let's say, is about a journey. So it's not like people are unaware, right? They craft a metaphoric journey of leaving the hut, leaving their mother, leaving their parents, and going out into the scary thing that is set up for them. And they set up terrible, horrible things for them, right? So that they are terrified and alone and only together with their peer group. So, and then they return and their status has changed and something is different and something new is born. So I think it's there in awareness anthropologically, whether or not it's self-aware. I'm not expert. That's above my pay grade.
There always was a notion of an internal world, but it was objectified. It was the dream world. Dreaming was always present.
So you're saying there is an internal journey. People are aware of that. They just externalize it.
Yeah,
in the ancient world.
And the dream is an internal.
It's one of them.
But there's also something else I wanted to mention. I don't know if it's irrelevant. If it is, I'll just stop. But Winnicott, another major concept of Winnicott's is the notion of the transitional space, transitional objects in transitional space, and that's connected with the notion that another notion of his, that there's no such thing as a baby. There's only a baby and a mother. Without a mother, there is no baby.
Yeah, because the infant doesn't exist for itself unless mother responds.
Right, and the elaboration of that could go on for a long time.
Yes.
But I think it's
well, I mean, some would say that it could go on. Yeah, well, it's called 4 more books. I mean, but it does go on, right? The Torah is the iteration of the rest of that journey. Okay, let's look a little bit here at Mehmet. You want to say something? Unmute.
Yes, just a quick comment. I think we have to bear in mind who this entire story is written for, and whom it is addressed to as well. It is, I mean, to anyone here in the room, physically and online. I think Lech Lecha is a story of our own family, of our own. It's our own story. So the internal journey and physical journeys we are obliged to do them anyway. I mean, we've known them for centuries and thousands of years. This is a Jewish story, and we all have to move somewhere else at a certain point of time. And none of us are sure how long we're going to be there where we are right now. And when we move somewhere, we rather make it a personal and internal journey as well. So we revitalize ourselves, we rediscover ourselves, we reinvent ourselves. This is the only way Jews can survive. So this text is certainly for Jews.
All right. Thank you, Mehmet. I'm just going to add a friendly challenge to that, which is some people don't leave. Some people don't ever leave. They're born and they're raised and they stay and they don't go anywhere and they live as adults in their parents' houses that they grew up in. So I think you're right. This is a Jewish story because I think this is a story of should on some level, not a story of
if you ever have to go, then you know how to go.
Yes, for sure. You Jews who are going to have to go, little did they know how much. But remember, this is stories written down by a people who are in its land. The people are in their land. The people have, and they have sovereignty in their land, and so it's an interesting juxtaposition of here we are settled in the land of Israel. These are our origin stories of when we had to leave, right? And got here to Canaan, which becomes Israel, right? It's just, so it's kind of, I don't know. It's interesting that it's looking to the far past to explain how we got here. Little did we know it was going to describe so well the Jewish future, right? After we lose sovereignty in the land. And to that point, Mehmet, it is a Jewish story, not necessarily an Israelite story, right? The Israelites trace their origins to this story, but it becomes a Jewish story because once you have Jews, you have exiles, right? And you have persecutions. All right, David, were you going to say something or what's happening?
You actually made the exact point that I was going to say, that this is sort of a personal version of the Exodus. Yeah, I think, that.
Although the Exodus is about liberation from and service to, right? For Avram, it's like, he's not oppressed. There's no suffering attached that we know of to him. So yes, it's kind of on the individual level, him leaving for sure. There's resonances of we will leave Egypt for sure, but it is very much the individual family versus the nation in those two leave takings. But you can't read these texts without, of course, reading what's going to happen later. I don't want to leave the meeting. What's going to happen later, right? Which is the Exodus. And so, this is where, what's his chops? This is where Micha Goodman argues it starts with Avram leaving Mesopotamia. In a few paragraphs, he's going to go down to Egypt because there's a famine, right? And he leaves Mesopotamia. It's the leave taking from the great metropolis, from the great empire, right? And that the entire Torah ends with us back in Mesopotamia and back in Egypt. that the whole Torah is a story of kind of the failure of the project.
Okay, I have a question. And if we look at the internal journey, that we all look inward to say, how did I get here? And certainly I am not a therapist, and there are many therapists in this room and online that can validate me or not. But we look at where did I come from? What kind of upbringing did I have? Why did I decide this? And then we go toward the place when we look inward. I don't know. It's sort of
okay. So we're going there. We're going to get there. All right. Okay. So let's go to the commentators who are going to develop.
Do you see anything that connects Abraham's motivation for actually going?
Abraham's what?
Motivation for actually going, in the same way that you talk about a baby being motivated to crawl because there's something there. Do you see any of that in this story, though? It sounds to me like there's just God going, you go.
That's his motivation. That
fear?
That's or this power speaking to him that he's never encountered before, but that says this is the next step.
Yeah.
So, but what I was talking about was, right, so what Zorenberg is pointing out is it makes perfect sense that it's leave this, because there's a series of abandonments that have to happen for us to be missing something. Our connection to that is in some way the missing that allows for us to reach for something else. So no, it's not articulate. She doesn't articulate what that is. All right. So let's look at Rabbi Shlomo Dov Ber of Lubavitch, so one of the early Lubavitcher sources. From the time that God said to our father Avraham, go from your land, and Avraham went on, journeying southward, began the process of birurim, of extracting the sparks of holiness that are scattered throughout the universe and buried within material existence. By the decree of divine providence, a person wanders about in his travels to those places where the sparks that are to be extracted by her await their redemption. The cause of all causes brings about the many circumstances and pretexts that bring a person to those places where his or her personal mission in life is to be acted out. Okay, very wordy, but very much you can see this shift to needing a spiritual interpretation of Lech Lecha that is gonna, Jody, I promise, go to an inner journey. But this one sounds like there's lots of places that we go. There's lots of places that we wander. And that is about, we are the only ones who can go to that place at that time under those circumstances and liberate the sparks of the divine that are trapped there. It was only Amy Rose Bernstein who could go to the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in 1992 and live on McCallum Street in apartment 305, September of 92. It's only I had to be there to liberate the sparks that only I could liberate, meaning not all gatherings would be vegetarian. So each of us, right, part of the whole point, the reason we wind up where we wind up is because only we can liberate the sparks because of our own history, our own attachments, what formed us, what made us, who we are, what we're not, our breakages, our challenges. Only we can liberate the sparks in that location at that time. And that's part of what the Rabbi Dov Ber is suggesting.
Through the conversation, I was thinking about what you said about, the search and to discover the source of our soul, the inner meaning. But I almost feel like you look within, you leave the land, you leave your father's house, and you go and you make a new community. So you can have whatever conversation with your inner feelings and your inner soul, but it seems to be successful if it's connected or you create a new community. And so metaphorically, I was thinking like the bar mitzvah kids, or you go to Shabbat tonight, and then you have your bar mitzvah, and then you go to college, and you got to leave, and you might get married, and you move to another location. If, in fact, you miss that feeling of KI, what if you don't ever come back? But then you go somewhere else to create something like you had at KI, but it's in a new place. So I think that's the goal of Lech Lecha, to go out.
Although to push on that, if I'm going to push on it then it's like you're saying, but it's to replicate the things I had at home.
No. That's the mommy and me talking, my children. But,
I understand that, Dana, having just had a kid leave for college. I completely understand.
Think about, I guess Abraham's dad died, but, when the kids go off, there's the story about the family that stays at home when they go off.
So anyway, I just want to, I'll say again, but yes, they have to go. What I'm going to say to refine what you're saying in a way that lines up more truthfully for me is that we have to let them go build what they're going to build. Building what they had at KI is exactly what Avram is not supposed to do. He's supposed to go build something else. What's hard for us, I think, for me, I will just say for me, what's hard for me is to let her go build what she wants to build. That is very hard, right? Like, if she wants to build what I built here, gesundheit hate. I will help fund it. I'll come volunteer. But wait, you're gonna create what you want to create? What you want to see happen? Based on what? On what you've experienced? What do you know? You're 5 minutes old, right? So I think that's part of the work here and then how do each of us get to an authentic sense of what we want to build? When are we just building what we were told we were supposed to build? Because that's what we grew up with, and we still schlep that around, right? Don't we? Am I the only one in the room? Right? We schlep that around. What we think we're supposed to have been about building, or what the society tells us we're supposed to be about building. I just had this conversation with a congregant, 63 years old, yesterday at lunch. Just had this conversation. Am I building truly what I think is a successful life? Or am I listening to the voices around me that say, yeah, but your house really isn't kind of up to snuff if we're really talking success. Look around, people. Your house is not $10 million. I see what you drive. It ain't the highest whatever Tesla or whatever, Peugeot, whatever. Truly, we just had this conversation. Am I building what I think is a successful life, or am I still measuring success and what that looks like by what society, American West Side of Los Angeles society tells me is a successful life? I think this is one of the core meanings of the story of Avram leaving everything that's familiar, including the reference points for what makes for success. He's got no indication he's going to have a kid, but one of the marks of success, even for him in this new place, is going to be offspring, right? And he's got no evidence for that.
You're talking about the building stage of your life, and there comes a point when you have to accept the fact that that building stage is kind of over, and you have to accept that you're no longer part of the builder.
So even if we're not talking about building, even if we're talking about the next stage,
it's acceptance.
Whose definition of success do I go by?
Right.
Mine, or what everyone else tells me? If I have grandchildren, I'm good. Then I have lived a successful life. If they talk to you, even better. You're super successful.
That's the internal.
So it doesn't
part.
matter what stage you're in. The learning is the same. By what standards do I decide that this is a life that is worthy of my, that's going okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So you have to leave.
Accepting.
Oh my God. Okay, here we go. Kehillat Levi for you, Jody. For this is a great general principle. To every place that a person goes, that person goes to their origin, their source, their roots. Meaning you don't really go out there, ever. You're always going to your source, to your root, to your origin. For of course, in that very place lies one's origin, source, roots, and that person needs to elevate them. To this is said, Lech Lecha, go to yourself, to your origin, to elevate those sparks. So this absolutely is there in the Kehillat Levi, what you were talking about, right? So we're going to go to Rabbi Art Green, who's also going to say something similar. Rabbi Art Green points out that many Jewish metaphors for the divine are vertical, inviting us to seek God in the mountains or in the heavens. He reminds us that Jewish tradition also includes other metaphors which invite us to seek holiness or wholeness by going deep within ourselves. We can conceive of this, he writes, as a journey inward, where the goal is ultimately a deep level of the universe within the self, rather than the top of a mountain or a ride in the clouds. The danger is that this might serve as a prescription for preoccupation with self. But according to Rabbi Green, the self is potentially a great gateway to deeper connection with others. This inwardness, he writes, is not only that of the individual, but the shared inner self of the human heart. How much do you love that? The inwardness is not only that of the individual, but the shared inner self of the human heart, the human community, and the world around us. Inwardness means the one is to be found within all beings. Boom! Yes.
So along those lines, in the recovery literature, people talk about doing a geographic, or those who are lost go to India to study whatever flavor of the day spirituality they have, and Baal Shuvas talk about finding what one is searching for in one's own background and one's own history and one's own liturgy. And I think at the end of the day, talking about a relocation, talking about a move, really is talking about wherever it is that you go, is really talking about going inward and observing one's own innermost thoughts.
Absolutely. And I love this, that Rabbi Green points out that it's just another metaphor. It doesn't mean it's the right one, the only one. It's another one. Some are vertical. There are days I lift up mine eyes to the hills from whence comes, please God, my help. Right? Please God, be my Ozer, be my help. Because we just feel really small and really lost, and we look up, right? And we want mommy or daddy or somebody, right? Somebody to pick us up and make it okay. That's fine. But there are other metaphors, says Green. This is one of them where it's about, more of a, I would say, vertical, that it's about, horizontal, that it's about, going, not only within me, because what he's saying is once I get to know more about me, truly know more about what goes on in here, I automatically know something about the human heart writ large. So I automatically know horizontally way more, right? Aren't the wisest people the people who are very aware of what's going on in here? They're not, you can't have one without the other. They're not unrelated. Like people who know people are people who are very self-aware. And so it's so, because it could be dangerous. If we're focusing on going in me, the danger is it becomes very egocentric. It becomes very self-preoccupied, navel-gazing, not Jewish, Mehmet, to your point, not Jewish, I can never do it. Navel-gazing is not Jewish. That's why we don't have monasteries. Because it's a temptation. Once you start to go in there, that is a very serious temptation. But what Rabbi Green says is that it's not just about knowing my innerness and what happens for me. It's about through that knowing something about what happens for every human being, and having more of a connection to that and more of a connection to those people. So Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, this is a beautiful teaching brought to us at Hartman by Rabbi Tamar Applebaum. Lech Lecha me'artzecha. Go you from your eretz, from your land. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says, get away from your self-centered earthiness, meaning literally get away from the land, your way of seeing that's about the earth, El haaretz asher ereka, to the aretz, to the land that I will show you, meaning look at the land from the perspective of God. God is saying, I'll show you, meaning look at it through my glasses. It's not saying I'm going to show you a different land. It's saying leave the way you see the land, and I will show you. What is God going to show Avraham? How to see things from God's perspective. The other commandment is Hebetna Hashemayma. I brought you that text. It's on the sheet. Verse 15. Look toward heaven. Words that are later echoed in the prophet's call, blah, 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 blah. The Torah gives us a beautiful application of the wisdom we attain when we rise above the horizon of our limited perceptions. Habetna hashamayma usforet hakochavim. Look towards the heaven and count the stars. Ko yihyeh zarecha. So will be your seed. You look at a star from where you stand on earth, the star seems a very tiny, whatever that word is, twinkle of a light. Is this the right way to evaluate a star? Habetna hashamayma, usforet hakochavim. Look heavenward and count the stars. Look, consider and evaluate stars the way they are in heaven. There, each star is of vast magnitude, of marvelous meaning, in sharp contrast to the way in which it is seen from the perspective of the earth. Look toward heaven and number the stars. So shall your descendants be. This is God's blessing to Avraham. Your descendants will be endowed with the ability to see heavenward. What? Right. That's the blessing, that your offspring, your people, we will be, through our tradition, through the wisdom, through the generations, through all of that, when we access it, when we study Torah, when we do this together, when we do Shabbos, when we observe sitting together in the sukkah and eating and drinking really good stuff. When we do that, we will be able to see things from a more godly perspective. That's the bracha. Barbara.
I guess you already answered it, but my question is twofold. I wish the Torah was more expansive because I'm sure Abraham was frightened. I would love to know what he felt when he was sent on this mission. And also, how did he know when he got there? There's a lot about going, but how was it identified to him? What was the sign? What was the signal that he had arrived at where he?
So to your question,
like on a GPS, right?
Yeah, right. So to your questions, Barbara, I'm going to say this with all respect, which is Torah doesn't care. You want it to be more expansive because you want Torah to care about what you care about. Torah doesn't care what Avram feels. Torah's not interested in the conversation he had with Sarai. I'm very interested. The rabbis were very interested. They wrote a whole lot of midrash. Jody's super interested. The rabbis wrote reams of midrash because they agree with you. But what they said is, okay, Torah doesn't say it. So maybe there's a word over there. Maybe there's a word in Psalms. Maybe there's a word in Joshua. Maybe there's a word in Chronicles that will signal to me something about what Abraham was feeling. And then they write that midrash. Do you see what I'm saying? The rabbis have the same longing you do. Torah does not care. It was not the agenda of the folks writing or telling these stories to explicate what Avram's feeling. My hunch, just as a cultural anthropology student for life, my hunch is it's because everyone knows what that means. Everyone knows what you're gonna, and I'm not saying it to be flip. Seriously. Torah knows that everyone knows what it's going to feel like to leave everything familiar. It's going to be terrifying. It's going to be disorienting. It's going to be scary. It's going to be lonely. Right? Like, Torah doesn't have to say it. Torah's assuming, I'm assuming, that Torah's assuming, and the authors of Torah are assuming that you know what it feels like as the listener to the story. That's not the point of the story.
The point is that he goes anyway.
The point is that he goes anyway. That's a Jewish story.
But how does he
go anyway? Because if he didn't go, we could imagine that 742 people that God said this to said, that's very funny. Okay. Not going to happen, right? The story is about this guy because this is the guy that went, right? And that's important. Okay. Oh, how are we at time already? I hate that. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to do what I wanted to do with you, which is this gorgeous midrash, but I want you to read it. Those of you who have it here in print, I want you to look at it. It's an amazing midrash that talks about a castle, and that the castle is lit up. And the same word in Hebrew that can mean lit up, birah doleket, can also mean on fire. And so it is a beautiful midrash that right now, the reason I said about bringing it right now is because it does feel to me a little bit like, the world is on fire. And anyone who wants to come be a son or a daughter of Avraham and Sarah, or a non-binary descendant of Avraham and Sarah, the rabbis, some of them use this midrash in the Talmud to say the world is on fire, and you're going to say no to somebody who's coming to grab a bucket, right, and help pour water on that fire. That's what conversion to Judaism is coming to grab a bucket. How could you possibly responsibly say no to that? But it's also just a wonderful midrash about, the world's on fire. What's our response? Okay. I do want to close with reading one poem a student of mine wrote many years ago in Duluth. Actually, let me not say that. I don't have a name on it. It's either my student or Rabbi Rachel Rosenblatt for sure. So it's one of those two. It may be Rachel Rosenblatt, the Velveteen Rabbi. First step, Lech Lecha. It's not going to be easy. All of your roadmaps are wrong. That was another country. Those lakes have dried up. A new groundwater is welling in places you won't expect. You'll begin the journey in fog, destination unknown, impossible. Don't be surprised by tears. This right here is holy ground. Take a deep breath and turn away from cynicism and despair. Listen to the voice from on high and deep within, the one that says, I'm calling you to a place which I will show you, and take the first small step into the surprising sun.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.